Dogs climbing and making noise.
What?
Dogs climbing on the couch and making noise.
I got it. That's what it was. Okay.
I'm muted.
So to answer your question, so there are a few different markers of how we define different elements in Jewish law. For example, you have a cucumber field, and when you harvest your cucumbers in Torah law, you have to, before you go just bring them home and sell them and so on, you have to allocate tithes. Whether it's to the poor, to the public servants, whatever. It's a pretty, it's 15% maybe. So how do we know? But it's supposed to be, you're supposed to allocate the tithe from its year's crop. How do you define which is the year's crop? What if it's one was early? Can you use it for the later crops up? So there are different demarcation lines in Jewish law. There are, like, if you gather them all together, probably another 10 that we call Rosh Hashanah. But Rosh Hashanah meaning that here's where we talk about the turning of the calendar with regard to something specific. And when it comes to trees, the Talmud tells us that when the sap begins to rise in the tree for its new crop, there's a debate whether it's the first day of Shvat or the 15th day of Shvat. There are different angles on it, but it's from there that begins whatever is now comes forth now. That's from the next year's crop. So in Jewish tradition and the Kabbalists too, since the idea of trees in general, morning, there's a lot of symbolism and significance to it because it's bearing fruit, and Torah is very sensitive to us protecting our environment, using it, but protecting it from unnecessary damage. And one of the things the Torah says, even in time of war, is to watch out for fruit trees. If you've got to knock it down to do what you need to do to protect people, do it, but don't unnecessarily destroy fruit trees. And the fact that the Torah uses the language that a human is like the tree in the field. There are certain analogies we can talk about. Our roots are bearing fruit. So I think this started more from the Kabbalists in Tzvat, where they made this the 15th day of Shvat, even though it's Talmudic, but Talmudically it's much more just it's a functional thing. When's the new calendar year start for tithing on trees, on fruits? They brought more insight into what it means for us as far as our own bearing fruit and our own rebirth in a new for a new season. And they would make us seder, which some people do today, not us. There was effort put into it, so it is traditional in many quarters to note that this is a time that in the land of Israel, which was always a focus of ours, this is a time where this is now the beginning of the new season, something to celebrate. When I was a child in school here in South Orange, to B'Shvat, they brought a carrot boxer. I never understood why they call that a fruit. It's horrendous to eat. It's okay, I don't know how to chew that. And then dates, figs, things that are enumerated as being fruits that that Israel is known for. So that is still done, and we'll do it. This week we'll do it also on the 15th of Shvat. So it's in Israel it's a bigger thing. It's talking about Israeli agriculture, but it is, when you say is it a real holiday, I would say lowercase r. And lowercase h. It's a holiday, but it has a source. But it's between what we do and where it comes from, there's a little bit of a gap. Yeah. Good. I give you too much information?
No, that was good.
Okay, good. Okay, now moving on to this coming week's Torah portion. So here, I want to just give as a preface something just really where this is going, because as I've told you, this is a very I like this curriculum. That's why I've chosen to use it for us. I hope you like it too. But in the way their curriculum is structured, it looks at a Torah portion, but it's not usually a study of something we're talking in the Torah portion. There's a little bit of that, but it's bringing us to something which is a little far afield, but it's a good Jewish idea. So here, the idea, if you look on page 55, and it's not in the, I'll read this because it's not on the PowerPoint. There's a question for discussion. Can you cite a recent example of when you stepped up to the plate and assumed a leadership role, however small? And then the question is, what motivated you to do so? So here's the idea that we're going to really be working towards today in our time together, although we are going to start off with an element of the scripture, of the Torah portion, the narrative that we'll be reading on Shabbos, this coming Shabbos. When after the Rebbe passed away in 1994, and there were a lot of different people who wrote retrospectives and thoughts and different ways of eulogies, I guess. There were a couple that really struck me as not only moving, but they for what I was in the Rebbe's orbit for as much as I could see, as much as I can say that I understood. I felt a few people really even encapsulated a very important, resonant part of the Rebbe's perspective and personality. One of them was Rabbi Dr. Jonathan Sachs. He unfortunately passed away past couple of years over COVID. He was chief rabbi of the British Commonwealth. He was not a Chabadster per se, but he was very connected to Chabad. I spent 2 years studying in London, and he was well known as an attendee to the Chabad synagogue. As a matter of fact, the Rebbe's edict that no one under 40 could drink more than 4 little shot glasses of alcohol was because he came home from shul plastered, and I shouldn't put this on a recording. And his wife wrote to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe said, "Enough of this." So but he was a very close friend of Chabad. I think his first book, you could Google it. His first book was when I was a student. It's called Torah Studies, and like the book what we have here in Torah Studies was really very much clear. It was a translation of some of the Rebbe's talks. He had a very close relationship. He wrote about his introduction to the Rebbe, and I heard it. I saw it in that original 1994, but then I heard it from him personally later. If I remember it correctly, he was a student in Cambridge, a Jewish student in Cambridge, brilliant guy, and in his either 20 or 21 or something like that. And as a young, bright, future-focused young man, he decided he was going to travel the world and interview Jewish leaders about what they thought about where Judaism was going and what needed to be done. And on his itinerary was a Rabbi Herson in Brooklyn, who he had never met, and he didn't know much about Chabad at the time. He went into the Rebbe, and he wrote in his thing, and you can Google it. I think he printed in the forward, that I found exactly the opposite of what I expected to find. So I came in to interview the Rebbe, and the Rebbe said to me, "You're a Jewish student in Cambridge, and you're observant. Are you able to keep kosher?" I said, "Yes." "So what about the other students? Are they able to keep kosher?" "I don't know." He says, "What can you do to enable other students to keep kosher?" So you have to think about it. He said, is there a Jewish student group, a Jewish student union on campus? No. So you're an identified Jew. Why don't you make one? So what he wrote is that instead of me interviewing him, the Rabbi, he was interviewing me. He said, but the greatest line was, and I thought it was so on target. I said, I thought I was going to meet a man seeking to attract followers. What I found was a man trying to create leaders. And that was very, very much the Rabbi. If any of you met him and he spoke to you and you spoke about your life, he would be encouraging you to do something in your sphere of influence to make this a better world. Doesn't have to be headline grabbing, doesn't mean you're elected to anything. You have a sphere of influence, you can make a difference. And that was very much the Rebbe's attitude. And I mentioned, even at my bar mitzvah, when I went in to see the Rebbe, I was a little squirt. And he told me that in West Orange, I was playing baseball with my friends, and I behave like a Jewish boy should. I inspire my friends, and they can go home and inspire their parents. Furthest thing from my mind at that point in my life was to go to influence adults. I'm like anyone. I was just trying to make it through, just do my thing and play baseball and Reggie Jackson, whatever it was. I didn't see myself as a kid in the influencer position. This was before influencer was a word. I certainly didn't see it in that way. And but the Rebbe definitely saw it that way. And even as a 13-year-old, he was trying to get me to be more proactive in influencing surroundings. Having said that, now we're going to get into one of the Rebbe's explorations of something in our Torah portion. Okay, so in this week's Torah portion, before we get into it, this week's Torah portion, the most, I guess, salient part of the Torah portion is that we've been unpacking the Exodus story. Yesterday we read about how the Jews were brought out of Egypt. This week, most of the Torah portion is about the Jews going through the Sea of Reeds. There's a piece there about the miraculous manna, and it ends off with the fact that a tribe of people who were an anti-Semitic tribe that dogged us for centuries, named Amalek, how they attacked the Jews and did damage. So we want to look in text 1, look about this Amalek, and look at we're going to focus here for a few texts on Moses' response. Text 1. Amalek came and made war with Israel in Rephidim. Moses said to Joshua was Moses' primary aide and disciple, choose men for us and go out and fight with Amalek. So in other words, you lead the troops. Tomorrow I will be standing up on top of the hill, and the staff of God will be in my hand. In other words, I'm going to watch the staff of God, which is powerful, and lead the people. Joshua did as Moses said to him and fought with Amalek. And Moses, Aaron, and Hur, Aaron is his brother, Hur is his sister's son. So this, a nephew and 2 uncles, who are leadership of the Jews, ascend to the top of the hill. Was that when Moses raised his hand, Israel prevailed, and when he lowered his hand, Amalek prevailed. Why would he lower his hand? He's tired. This guy's 80 years old at this point, right? How long are you going to keep your hands up? Moses' hands grew heavy, and they took a stone and placed it beneath him. And he sat on it, and Aaron and Hur supported his hands, one on this side and the other on that side, and his hands were steady until the setting of the sun. It says, and Joshua defeated Amalek and his people by the sword. Okay, so this is, you have the imagery. Moses, and it's important to know it's going to come up, he's already 80 years old. And Aaron's even older. And they are they are up on the mountain while the people are the fighting, and Joshua is the general on the ground. Now, what is the raising of the hands? Raising of the hands means, if we take a look at text 2, the Medrash tells us, it was that when Moses raised his hand, Israel prevailed. Then Moses' hands asked the Medrash, make the war or break the war? What does that do with his hands? Of course not. Rather, what does raising the hands mean? It symbolized something, and it directed the Jews' perspective. The entire time that the Jewish people gazed upward and bound their hearts to their Father in heaven, they prevailed. And when they did not, they failed. So what was Moses doing? Moses was praying. Moses is also, he's a spiritual cheerleader. And in the heat of battle, you're thinking about battle, and you're thinking about survival, and you're thinking about victory. But his holding his hands up is saying, remember up. Remember, you will be successful, but you're doing God's work, and stay connected to God. So he is a spiritual mnemonic to bring attention to the people, so they keep focused that they're doing God's work. Now, yes.
One of the things I have never understood is why Amalek was attacking the Jews. And because presumably they considered themselves as defending their territory, not necessarily being anti-Semitic.
It wasn't, no, this was not their territory. This is not where they lived. And one of the things that we find in Jewish writings about why, I mean, we've had a lot of people wanting to kill us. A lot of people not nice to us. There's a whole pantheon of anti-Semites. Why is Amalek so terrible? So it was Amalek, there was no reason. Even though I think anti-Semitism is irrational for a lot of people too, but at least they hang it on a reason. Amalek just hated us. And therefore, I mean, this curriculum was probably written last May, so they didn't have in mind October 7th. But if you think about it, I don't think we'll get into it now. Someone dislikes Jews, it's a horrible thing. Maybe they'll tell me this, they'll tell me that. Is it that really fine? Weeks we can talk about it. If the Palestinian hatred was about having a place to live, this would have been solved long ago. Or at least somewhat. What happened? 2005, the Israeli army goes into Gaza, uproots Jews from their homes. Forcibly. Jew and Jew. It was tragic. They leave behind synagogues. They drag Jews kicking and screaming across the border. Jews leave behind a $2 billion greenhouse industry. What? Infrastructure, greenhouse industry. Aside from the infrastructure. The Palestinians came in, and it's documented. They burned everything down. They burned down the synagogues. They burned down the greenhouses. And it turned into a launching pad for missiles. So for anyone to think, because I was there in the summer of 2005, and I was there with a couple of families from here, and one of them is a man, he's already 96, he may live and be well. He's a man, he's a very successful, smart man, not an observant one per se. But he and I spoke about this Saturday afternoon in the Sheraton, and he was saying, because Jews were still out on the streets protesting the forcible evacuation of Jews. And he said to me, this is a good thing. And I looked up to him. I just look up to him. I said, I hope you're right. He said, they're just like us. They just want to live. They want to make a living. They want to live free. And this will help. And I said, and what if it becomes a missile pad for launch, a launching pad for missiles, like everybody, people are saying? He said, I don't think it's going to happen. And a couple of years later, he lives in Short Hills. I was in his house. I didn't say a word. I had forgotten actually about the conversation. And he was high-minded enough to say, do you remember that conversation? I said, yeah. He said, I was wrong. I thought they think like us. They just hate us. That's it. That's where the objective is. Now, that's depressing. And how do you sit with someone like that? And that's really the question facing now. How do you have a partner? How can you have a two-state solution when the other state is devoted to your destruction? Two-state solution sounds great. Let them live, but let them stop with the hatred. And since we in the UN, everyone has allowed for decades of training children to hate. I don't know how it's going to get better. I know someone was here yesterday. He was just in Israel. He himself was originally Israeli, and I asked him. He went for business, but I asked him if he went to Gaza or to the south, and he said he didn't have much chance, but he did spend time with a friend of his who is a commander of a certain a high place commander in the IDF and in the south, and he's in Gaza. And he said, there are two things we see in every single Gazan home. What did he say? He said, number one, we see a picture of their children with an Uzi or an RPG. And number two, we see a picture of the map of Israel, and it X'd out and say, this belongs to us. So that's just the way they're trained. What do you really expect from a kid who's raised that way? But to hate and to see me and you as a devil. It takes an extraordinary person to be able to get past them. What do you expect from John Gotti's kids? But to be mafia. That's just the way it is. That's what you're raised with. Not comparing the two, actually. But this is
Mafia are nice.
that's why I was saying. There's at least some code. There's some code of values there. So I take that back. But my point is that this is to answer the question. Amalek was just a senseless hatred. Okay, now back to here. So what we're saying is, what the Medrash is saying is that Moses is there as this spiritual conscience. Sure, we always believe that in battle today too, and there are beautiful videos we get probably on a daily basis from different soldiers recognizing that they're on the front lines doing the dangerous work, but they need us doing the work too of remembering and praying and giving and sending moral support. So Moses, it's a scene that makes sense to me. Moses is 83 years old. He's up there. He's doing what he can. Even in Torah law, over 60, they don't go into the army. In American law, it's a lot less. I think it's 39, 40, something like that. But so Joshua was then, as we'll see, he was in his 50s. So it would seem to make sense. But then if you take a look at text 3a, this is from Rashi. Rashi only comments when there's something that doesn't make sense to him. Why didn't this make sense? The scene seems fine. But he says something. He says 3a. He says Moses' hands grew heavy. The Torah is telling us that it wasn't just old age, that there was a spiritual response from God making his hands heavy because he shirked the mitzvah of going to lead his troops and pointed another to take his role. His hands became heavy. So Rashi is saying something, and it's saying again, seemingly there's no need to say anything because there's no problem with it. An 80-year-old guy who's led the Jews already. He led them out of Egypt, and he's up there with the praying for the Amalek for the war against the Amalek and encouraging the Jews spiritually and so on. But Rashi says, don't take it as just he was tired. There's a message here. The message is that Moses made a mistake. He should not have delegated this to Joshua. So let's look at 3b. We have to understand what's the problem with that. Moses' hands grew heavy, 3b, in 58. Rashi got this from the Medrash. What does the Medrash tell us? Here we learn that one should never defer a mitzvah. For had Moses not told Joshua, choose men for us, he would have not have incurred the suffering. He wouldn't have had the supernatural heaviness of his arms if he hadn't told Joshua, you choose men and go do it. If he would have stepped up to the plate and gone into it, he would have. It is said at that moment, Moses' hands were as heavy as if 2 jugs of water hung from him. He became supernaturally, his arms became supernaturally heavy. So, question is, why didn't Moses do it? And I guess, why did he have to? He was doing a good thing. So now let's look at another part of the Torah where Moses is even older, and now he's preparing and he's saying to God, it's time for me to prepare a successor. There's a succession drama here, which isn't as dramatic as some others perhaps. Moses spoke to God, saying, may God of the spirit of all flesh appoint a man over the congregation. I need someone else who will go out before them, will come before them, will take them out and bring them in, so the congregation of God will not be like a flock that has no shepherd. What is he saying? A leader leads. Go out before them, who will come before them. And there, what does Rashi tell us in text 5? Who will go out before them, unlike those kings of the nations who sit in their palace and send their soldiers to war. My successor ought to do as I have done when I fought against Sichon and Og. Now, what was with Sichon and Og? 40 years after the Amalekite attack. They're attacked because they're going through the land, because they're going through tribal lands. They're attacked by these group of Sichon and Og. Sichon and Og are the names of the leaders. And God tells Moses, leave, do what you got to do. Right? And I am with you. And Moses leads them. He's 120 years old, 119. And he says also, as Rashi says there, he says that a leader has to lead. So why was it different 40 years later? And Amalek, why did he sit out? He didn't sit out. Why did he take a more, a desk job in the war against Amalek? An important desk job. Cheerleaders. But why didn't he get his hands dirty on the ground like he would do 40 years later? And as we see in text 6, as I told you already, Moses was at that time 80 years old, the Amalek, right? And Aaron was 83 years old when they spoke to Pharaoh. And this is a year later, not even a year later. So, why did Moses feel? Now remember, Moses has just gone through the idea that he is selected by God to go and speak to the most powerful man on the planet named Pharaoh, who's an anti-Semite, who's in the middle of enslaving the Jews, Israelites, and he's going to go without guards, without weapons, and he says, let my people go. He could have been beheaded right away, right? In normal thing. And then not only does Pharaoh not touch him, but there's the whole drama we've read about for the past few weeks. And there's the Passover drama, what we've seen to say, the 10 miraculous plagues that everyone can see. And Moses has a front row seat. God is running the show. The Jews come out, the sea splits. Then manna starts to fall. So for Moses to think, so what if I'm 80? So what if I'm 80? This is, all bets are off. The natural limitations that we usually live by seem to have totally gone out the window in this whole Exodus story. And just like he did 40 years later, and God said, I'm with you, I have your back. As a 120-year-old, he went out, or 119, he went out and he led the people. Why shouldn't he do it now? So the text itself tells us, right before that story with Amalek, immediately before it, the Torah tells us this. The entire congregation of the children of Israel traveled from the wilderness of Tzin on the travels. At the word of God, they camped at Rephidim, and there was no water for the people to drink. So the Jews have come out of Egypt. They've gone through this miraculous crossing of a split sea, and now they're thirsty. As we see from the Jews, and we see in human nature, it's pretty much a "what have you done for me lately" attitude. The people quarreled with Moses, and they said, "Give us water that we may drink." Moses said to them, "Relax. God's taking care of you. It's going to come." He says, "Why do you quarrel with me? Why do you test God?" The people thirsted there for water, and the people complained against Moses, and they said, "Why did you bring us up from Egypt to kill me and my children and my livestock with thirst?" So we shouldn't have left. They spent centuries suffering. It wasn't just free labor, suffering, abuse, horrible mental, emotional, physical abuse. And they just flew the coop. 10 days ago. And they're already saying, "Yeah, let's go back." Why? Because I'm thirsty. What happens? God tells Moses, hit a rock, miraculously, you're going to be able to feed this whole group of people. Is over 2 million people. From this rock, there's a gusher, there's going to be enough water. Beautiful miracle. But what does it tell us? That is the preface to the next piece of this, is that Amalek attacked the Jewish people. Why is that? Why is the next one? You see, this is Exodus 17 in the beginning, and it starts Exodus 17:8 already starts the Amalek. So let's just go a little further. Text 8. What do we read from that story? He called the place the later on, text 7, in verse 7, it concludes with that Moses called the place Massa and Meriva, which means trial and quarrel, due to the quarrel of the children of Israel and due to the testing of God, and saying, "Is God among us or not?" What does it mean? And what are the commentaries point out? The Jews, God runs the world, and God gave us a world where there's nature, there's physics. You have to respect physics because it's real. God created it. And therefore, if I touch a hot stove, I'm going to get burned. That's just the way it is. Not only that, even if I don't touch a hot stove, the world, because of the way God created it, and where people have free moral choice, it's kind of a jungle. Might makes right. I mean, you got to watch your back. What does God say then? That when you're plugged into me, I protect you. Have a mezuzah? The mezuzah is a recognition that this is God's protection. Doesn't mean that nothing can ever happen when there's mezuzah on the door. Kidding, put them up on all cancer wards. But it is a conduit for blessing to people in the room and to all elements of what's going on in that environment. So what God gives us opportunities for is to say is, I'm going to give you layers of protection. Your layers of protection come through being plugged into me. If you unplug from me, it's not necessarily going to be, I'm going to punish you. But what happens? You don't have the layers of protection. Remember, years ago, we used to have, I don't know if any of you remember, we used to have a magazine, like an old-time magazine, if you remember what those are, like with paper. And it was called Living Judaism. And I wrote an article about mezuzah and about, protection, story I'd had. And I got since it was reprinted in certain places, I got a letter from someone in South Jersey saying, because I had written about how a couple was trying very hard to have children, and they were going through in vitro, it wasn't working. And we put up a mezuzah, and then they came to me 2 weeks later, that she's pregnant. That's someone else's story, but I shared it in that article. So the guy wrote to me. He says, "So does that mean you tell me that people don't have children are punished because they're not wearing, they don't have mezuzah?" It's a good question, and I actually reprinted it in the next that question, and I gave my answer, which is it's something that everyone said. On a battlefield, a soldier should wear a helmet. Not wearing a helmet doesn't draw a bullet, but it protects you. The bullet protects you if it comes. The helmet protects you if the bullet comes. Not putting up a mezuzah doesn't draw some curse, but having the mezuzah helps protect us from some of the things that go on in life. They're just natural. So here, what happened with the Jews? The Jews started to quarrel with God. They had just had so many miracles. And now they say, yeah, we don't trust you. We're thirsty. At that point, Moses understood, if they're unplugged, we're going back to the laws of nature. We're going back, we're not going to have the protection. And he started to worry about being an 80-year-old in battle. But before we get to Moses, let's look at text 9 of what the Mendy tells us. Actually, Rashi tells us. Rabbi Levi said, "What is this like? How did this play out by God? How did he take the complaining about the food, about the water?" Rabbi Levi said, "What is this like? A son riding on his father's shoulders. He saw something he desired, and he said, 'Get it for me, Dad.' And his father got it for him. That happened once, twice, a third time. The son saw a man and said, 'Have you seen my father?' He's riding on his father's shoulders. Someone's walking by, and he says, the kid says, 'Do you know what my father is?' And his father, he's right underneath it. He hears it. Father said, 'You ride on my shoulders. I give you everything you ask for. And you say, "Have you seen my father?" So you know something? Go off my shoulders. You can walk." Father let his son down, and the dog came and bit him. What does it mean? He said, "I'm trying to protect you." That makes you forget me? Walk, and then you'll see you'll have more reason to appreciate me and call for me. So what?
Considering the age of the commentary,
Yes.
could this be the origin of the dog in Chad Gadya?
We could. I can't say no. So it definitely predates Chad Gadya. So it was with Israel when they left Egypt. The clouds of glory surrounded them. They asked for bread, and God brought down manna for them. As it says, and God rained down manna for them to eat grain from heaven and gave them. Then they asked for meat, and he gave them quails. It says they requested meat, and he brought quail. So too it says he brought them the desire, he provided all their needs. And then they said, "Is God among us?" God said to them, "If this is what you think of me, put you down, and the dog might bite you." That's when Amalek came. So to help frame, just trying to, we're still trying to understand. We're not getting to our original question.
It seems so stupid.
Go ahead.
I mean, like, I don't know if the man was a bad parent or not in the first paragraph. He thought he was doing well. Maybe he wasn't,
Yeah.
But it's like there are so many people, they mean well, and it doesn't work out. But they meant well.
Yeah.
Here, okay, in the second paragraph, maybe they didn't mean well. But they were kind of stupid, I would say.
Who's
the people who
Yeah.
said they saw this, they saw that, they still had no faith. Maybe they were stupid. So a stupid person, why should a dog bite a stupid person? That's not the best way to educate somebody. It'll educate them, but it's like a corporal punishment. It doesn't really work.
Okay, so I think I can understand where you're coming from. I think the point of this is, there's a verse in Isaiah which basically says, remember that you're Jewish, because when you forget, someone else is going to remind you, and that's not pleasant. It's idea is in the world, if you are paying all of your children's bills and they're taking it for granted, maybe you don't pay all the bills. Maybe you say, you know something, I'm not going to pay that. Go and earn it yourself. It's healthy for the child. The idea of God saying here, a child is benefiting directly from the parent, and it's an absurd example because who forgets that they're riding on the father's shoulders? But the idea is that, yeah, it happens. How many kids really process that their parent is paying the college tuition for them? It's going from a parent to the office. They're not. Maybe some different kids have different things. Maybe they're taking college student loans. I'm not. But when gifts are given, and there is a propensity for people to take it for granted. There is, I mean, it happens. There's no question. It just happens. Someone told me recently, a school in a different state. They said, I pay tuition. It's a Chabad school for all of my students. I give free tuition to all of my teachers in our school. I said, when we talk salary, they totally forget. They don't even remember that I do it because they never get a bill. So there's something to this. The point of what God is saying is, I'm taking care of everything, and you think this is normal. Manna, split seas, whacking your foes and your oppressors with plagues. Experience the real world. Maybe you'll say, hey, you know, now I remember you. I need your help. So, text 10a. Okay. This we bring in 10a and 10b just a bit of
commentary.
Yeah, well, it's a little bit of debate, midrashic debate about how old Joshua was. But like I say, he was under 60. At the time of war with Amalek, Joshua was 57 years old. And in text 10b, we say Joshua was then 42 years old. So he was even more, and he was born in the year 2406. So, and on the verse, Moshe's deputy, Joshua was a lad. Rabbi Avraham Ibn comments that he was 56 years old. Whatever the case is, he was under 60. It made sense for him. Moses felt was that if they just unplugged, I can't rely on miracles anymore. We need to have an army that makes sense. 80-year-old general doesn't make sense. Joshua makes sense. And we find in text 11 that what he did was not just hold up his hands and remind people, the soldiers, to believe in God. It says his hands were steady, from the Medrash. It means his two hands are referred to as one. In the Hebrew, this isn't the greatest text for them to bring because you have to know Hebrew to understand what they're saying. In the Hebrew of it, at the "and" is singular, and the "and" were, and the hands were steady. There is singular, so he has two hands, but they're referred to as one. What is it? Why is that? Two hands are referred to as one, standing firm in prayer, because he was so. They were like together. He was so devoted in prayer that his hand, it wasn't the right hand, the left hand. He was in total commitment, and this is why the words vayihi and emuna, there's two words there that are in the singular form. So then, therefore, Moses' plan.
And what did they mean?
What do they mean? Vayihi means and it was, and emuna means firm.
Like this.
Yeah,
like
yeah,
that.
yeah. It doesn't mean necessarily clasping, but
like
it could have been that, yeah. But it means that what the Mendy is saying is that it was he was lost in something higher. It wasn't that, and therefore he was one mind and one body, connecting with higher. He was in prayer. It wasn't just he was praying to God for success in the battle, not just inspiring them, but praying. Now, if that's the case, what was the problem? Let's take a look. Why would we say that he was somehow he allowed a mitzvah to escape him? He should have been leading, when he makes perfect sense that he wouldn't lead. He's 80 and they're not experiencing miracles right now. Text 12. God, however, counted this as some sort of shirking the mitzvah. This is summed it up. Still no, Rashi comes along where it makes perfect sense. An 80-year-old tells a 40-year-old or 50-year-old to go lead. No. Still, Rashi comes and says, it wasn't because he was naturally tired. It wasn't because he was 80 years old. He shirked a duty. What was that? When foreign nations attacked the Jewish people, and this was true even prior to giving the Torah, there is a mitzvah, indeed a genuinely great mitzvah, to go out to battle and protect the Jewish people. This must be done without overthinking or great calculation, even in a scenario such as this, where there was no explicit command from God to do so. In Israel, on October 7th and 8th, and even now to some extent, everybody went out to help. Either they're reservists, they were able to, some people, the army people said, not going to work. But they were, I heard from people who were there at the time. Everybody, either they were helping to support the soldiers, the effort, they were feeding, going, even now, like Malki went, I would love to go to Israel. Even if picking avocados helps the effort, I'm in. Yeah.
If everybody is in,
yeah,
in a certain sense, all the citizens are. It's a citizen army.
Yeah.
So why is in this notion that everybody's in the army, how come a hostage life is worth more than a soldier's life?
That's a very good question. It's a very sensitive question.
I'm not talking emotion. I'm talking about rational.
That's very difficult to do. And I hear you. I totally hear you. I don't know if anybody could hear it. I don't.
I'm talking about how you run a war.
That's
a 20-year-old soldier to die for 80-year-old hostage. His life is not worth the same or more. If it's a citizen's army, I mean,
Malari, there is a lot of rationale into saying that we shouldn't be paying for hostages. We shouldn't be even doing hostages. We should rescue them all, but not even doing hostages exchanges.
I'm talking about, you know where Sinwar is.
Yeah.
And he is surrounded by
hostages, yeah. Just kill him and blow everyone up.
Their life is not worth it. They actually became soldiers unwittingly. I'm not saying
this is a very sensitive question, and I must say that
if I were a rabbi, I would say their life is not worth more.
No life is worth more than another. There's no question. And the idea, though, is that it's a very, very sensitive one. It has emotional impact. I am thankful to God that I don't have to make this decision.
Rabbi,
one could say, I'm
Rabbi,
sorry?
Can I interject something? Having
Sure.
been there just very recently, if there's any question about, well, just blow them up and give them this and that, take your butt, get on a plane and go to the memorial, and you'll see what 130 people look like in prison. Go and look at the setup of a dinner table with 100 and some spaces empty with pictures on that. And then sit there and pontificate and say, well, this is worth this and this is worth that. No, nobody's life is more valuable than anybody else's life. So I get offended when I hear this kind of conversation going on. And you haven't been there. You haven't been out in the field to pick the fruit You haven't been out there to make 4,000 packages for the soldiers. You haven't made 500 hamburgers and sit down with these poor guys that are risking their life. So before you make a comment, LL flies out a couple days a week. Go there, sit and experience it before you pontificate on it.
Dr. Feynman,
Yes.
I hear that that's from the heart. This is a very difficult subject. If we were talking about this in the abstract, and there weren't 130 or however many it is, I don't think we even know exactly how many. There weren't people being held hostage right now, and we were just sitting talking in the abstract, and that's very, very important. And say, does it make sense for us to do, a 4-to-1 hostage exchange? I think a lot of people would say, yeah, we should be strong enough to do it. But when you have those people, and then you say, when you look at those faces, and how do you say no? I totally get it. I think though that for me, it's a very emotional thing, and I don't know how I would ever be able to say, no, we're not going to do a hostage exchange, and we're not going to let that little girl come back or that man come back.
Exactly.
At the same time, if we were talking about this just in an ivory tower, and we could show that Sinwar got out in a hostage exchange, he would have been in prison. These things, it's a very, very difficult thing. I don't get into this conversation because there's no, I know, obviously Larry asked, I'm going to get into it, but a little bit, but it's an emotional one. And my emotions are engaged in it. And I myself will say, I'm glad Malky went, so I had a proxy there. But we should all want to be part of this effort, and we should all want every single one of those people back. And this will do anything. But rationally, maybe anything does not. It might end up hurting someone else down the line. And so we're going to go for a benefit now. And maybe someone's blood who has no less right to live gets hurt 10 years from now because we made a move now. So
They got hurt now. The soldiers that died, they have parents, they have family too. And the other thing is, don't say you should do when you don't know what other people have done. So I don't like that, and I wouldn't criticize personally, and that's not very nice.
And I want to say another thing.
Uh-oh.
I just want to say, I don't think you understood what I said. And what I'm saying is that if it's a citizen army, they know where Sinwar is, and it's in Kiddush Hashem.
Yeah.
The 50 hostages died, and he dies, and the war's over. That's a good thing. And I tell you, if I were a mother and my son had died because of some stupid policy the Israeli government has of like fighting with one hand behind your back and killing many more Palestinians,
right?
I think that I would choose bomb that guy, and they just and I want to say one other thing. I gave $5,000, so shut your mouth.
Okay.
Ooh, big deal. $5,000. Ooh, big deal.
Okay.
Don't tell me to shut my mouth, number one. Number two, you haven't been there. The little old lady who said, well, you haven't do this and that. You haven't been there. Get off of your butt and do something that makes a difference. Oh, you gave $5,000. Doesn't make a difference. Be there with the people. Help the people.
We're not, let's.
I just want to say.
Okay, let's.
I didn't say I
don't like
comment in a remark. You did to me.
Right, so let's not make this personal.
And I still think.
Let's not make this personal.
I can't help but make it personal.
I know, and it shouldn't have been personal. It shouldn't have been made personal.
I can't help but make it personal because I've been there. And when you see 200 soldiers killed in Gaza,
Dr.
200 soldiers.
I can't hear what is it. But the point is, let's not engage in this conversation anymore. It is, no, I understand. It is, I told you, I can understand is an emotional thing, and there's this, and frankly, I don't know if they know really where Sinwar is, because I've heard that a few times.
I heard that.
Yeah.
They know
But
where he is. He's surrounded
I
by
think
the
And,
That's true.
not that I know much about anything more than you know about the strategy, but I don't think even if they killed Sinwar, I don't think that ends the war.
I think
They-
we should do Torah study. and,
I think, I'm good.
I'm here for
No.
Torah. Me too.
I'm not mad, I'm just a
I
little bit.
insult him. He insulted us. I don't like it. And I don't see that as good. And he doesn't shut himself up. He just doubles down. So you're perfect. You did everything great. Everyone should do just like you. No.
No, you should do the right thing.
Okay, let's,
So who can say what's the right thing? We run
You
a
should
check
do the
to
right
help
thing.
people. People are
Rabbi-
fed from our money. I don't know what your avocado
Rabbi,
says.
I'll,
The
I'll,
okay,
avocado.
I'll see you
let's,
next
we're gonna-
week.
let's-
Avocado.
I'll see you
Okay.
next week.
Mendy,
I'll see you next week.
I'd like to refer to the Pirkei Avot.
which is what?
Okay, just this past week, they've identified another one of the 9/11 victims.
I heard that.
And the point is, whether you like what you're doing or not, you must persist.
Ah. Okay. All right. Meanwhile, back at the ranch. Okay, so. Text 13. No, did I finish this? Yes. No, maybe I didn't finish it. Go out to this move done without overthinking or great calculation, even in a scenario such as this, where there was no explicit command from God to do so. Here, what they were saying, and this is what got us into our interesting conversation. Moses should have wanted to go. The people are being oppressed; they're being attacked. And here, what the Rebbe is saying is that God expected him to say, "I'm going with my men. I'm going with my soldiers to be part of all this." Text 13. This is where the Rebbe went again. This wasn't said in the time of war. He was talking about the war against assimilation, the war for Jewish continuity, and where we all can be leaders in that. And in text 13, it says Amalek, that's the name of that tribe. The numerical value is equal to that of the Hebrew word suffix, meaning doubt, which in turn is equal to the word mar, which means bitter. The meaning here is that we each have an inner Amalek, and a concept of Amalek, which instigates doubts concerning belief in God and sanctity of the Torah. And along those lines, 14a, we have the Torah later tells us, remember what Amalek did to you on the way upon your exodus from Egypt. He encountered you on the way, and he attacked from behind you, all the stragglers behind you, and you were faint and weary, and he did not fear God. And that is something which is not an ancient thing, an ancient tribe. We don't even know if they exist anymore. It's a concept that is still part of who we are. And who does all the stragglers behind you refer to? It says those lacking strength due to their sins, for the protective cloud left them. The Medrash tells us, and Rashi brings to here, that the Jews were protected by a cloud of glory. Those who were not plugged in, so to speak, the cloud, they were like outside the cloud. The cloud moved away from them. So therefore, those were the stragglers. Those are the people who were vulnerable. It was the spiritually weak who were vulnerable, because the other ones were being protected by the cloud of glory. Similarly, now we have people, the Rebbe is here talking about assimilation. We have people outside of the cloud of glory, so to speak, or who are out, they're not seeing themselves in a Jewish context. And here, everybody needs to act. And in text 15, this is from the laws of Shabbos. The laws of Shabbos, it says, what happens if Shabbos, for instance, I don't use a phone. Someone has a medical emergency. Call a doctor, call an ambulance. One might think, I'm really careful about my Shabbos. And I don't use the phone. So, oh my gosh, someone, God forbid, someone's having a medical emergency. So I tell someone else who's carrying the phone with them. Use the phone. Why should I? They don't really care so much about it. The Jewish law says it is a mitzvah for the giants of Israel to take action. You have to make a point that, the leadership go and say, no, not this. This is not beneath me. It's the right thing to do to call the 911. Do it. Don't ask someone else to do it. Specifically them, the greatest of Israel, so their actions may teach the public the proper course of action. In Jewish law, if there's two doctors living, the old, maybe that's all the tenement houses and the apartment buildings, and you can communicate through the windows. And one is a non-Jewish cardiologist, another one's a Jewish cardiologist, and the Jewish cardiologist gets a call. Oh my gosh, someone had a heart attack. He shouldn't call and say, Vito, can you go? Why? He doesn't have Shabbos. Why should I do it? That's Jewish law sees that as a violation. No, you go. You Jewish cardiologist, you go, because it's a mitzvah. You have to do it. It's the right thing to do. It's standing up for people and being there in the Torah way. So
alternately, though,
yeah,
he could say to the other cardiologist, "Come with me. With our combined knowledge, we may save this guy."
If he thinks it's necessary, for sure. Whatever it needs takes for the the Jewish cardiologist come with me. If that's what's necessary, that's what's necessary. Text 15. And they can drive home from the hospital afterwards, because you don't want them to hesitate. The last time I went, I had to stay it's Friday night and I lost my whole Shabbos. Text 15. I'm sorry, text 16. It is not enough to participate spiritually in every generation's war against Amalek. We cannot satisfy ourselves by reciting a chapter of Psalms as a prayer that others come closer to Judaism, even though this is necessary and important. It is also insufficient to send messengers to reach our fellow Jews. Instead, we must personally go out and do whatever is necessary to protect our fellow Jews. So the point of this is that Moses is being criticized here because he didn't step up to the plate in a time of emergency. Even though he didn't, he had reasons, so many reasons not to do it. In a time of need, step up. Key points.
So would a key point be that prayer alone is
Not enough?
enough?
Definitely not. In war, you need prayer. You need guns. There's no question. And prayer is good for that person who has the cardiac episode also. Get a doctor. Key points. Moses didn't personally lead the battle against Amalek. In contrast to how he behaved in other wars, he was punished for this decision. 2, typically, God himself respects the laws of nature and expects us to do the same. However, the Jewish people in the desert didn't operate on that level. Next, alas, the Jewish people subjected themselves to nature even in the desert by complaining and losing faith. Moses' reasoning not to personally go out to battle and defy nature was based on the Jews' behavior. Finally, his mistake was that when lives are at stake, there's no place for calculation, so ever justified they may seem. Yeah, Nick, sorry about this. Maybe I should have shut it down earlier, but I figured adults will take care of themselves. What?
There's no right answer.
So, 1 second. There's a chat question. Oh, no problem. Okay. And if there are any questions, you can deal with those now, or else I'll see you next week, God willing.
One hopes.
One hopes. That's why I say, God willing. Be well.
Thank you.
Bye, Rabbi.